So in this, I want to present on how Webpack internally works. It's just a pure JavaScript file, but how even the bundler works. So for that, I need to start from the way it started in the beginning days. So let's go with the very olden days in 2000, how it was there first. So in those days, JavaScript was mere event listeners. All the logic sits in the backend, and the front end is just a presentation. And all we write in JavaScript is like just event listener for a button click or whatever the click it is. And then what we started doing is we just started abstracting as a separate function and then referencing that function. And then we started taking it to a separate file. And that's where the next question comes. Okay, so now we have two requests has to be made. One request is to load the HTML, and the second request is to load the JavaScript file. And this makes file size to be more critical now. So given to explain the file size here, so this is a small JavaScript file. And if you look at this file, the file size is like 100 bytes. And what we did during that time is we reduced the variable names, like the function name changed into EF and all the single characters, and then removed all the white space and turned into a single line. And then the file size become 75 bytes. So those days it is called minified files. So all we had is like a minified JavaScript file as our production ready JavaScript. And then we started creating multiple JavaScript files. And instead of loading all JavaScript files, we started combining everything as a single JavaScript file and then started doing the minification process. And we had this combined minified file as the next set of production ready JavaScript. And this leads into the next issue, which is polluting the global scope. Say, for example, in this case, this file is a combination of three files. And when it gets executed, they all get attached to the window object. So the scope is always global scope. There is never a local scope or anything available for this. So suppose file one has get date function implemented and file three got another get date implementation that might break the logic and make break the app also. So that's what the polluting global scope issue. So the scenario we had that time to address is IIFE pattern. To explain what it is, so here is a function. So the whole idea is like JavaScript is a function level scope. So that's where we can make sure we can avoid this global scope concept. So how they achieved here is we started wrapping a function within another function, unnamed function, which is an anonymous function. But a function can be executed without calling the function name of it. So we need to turn this into an expression first. And that's what you're seeing here. This function has been turned into an expression. And then to create a scope of it, we need to immediately invoke it. And that's what's happening. So that's what it is. Immediately invoked function expression. That's what IIFE pattern. Now what happens here is at this line of execution, this date won't be attached to the window object and the display date and time won't be attached to the window object. The scope remains within that function itself. Now we want to turn this into a module. And how it has happened? So now if we look at this function, it has an external dependency called this jQuery. So we started injecting arguments. So this is the solution we had at that time to avoid this global scope issue. And then the next issue came, which is JavaScript version. So JavaScript started getting better and better. A lot of updates started coming like a lot faster these days. So let's say variable is a scope level, which has been now introduced like two more scope, which is let and const has been introduced. To give an example here, from the server side, this is the minified version of the latest version of JavaScript. And that works fine in one client machine. I just gave a green color for that. And another machine it broke because that engine doesn't know what this let means. So we need a backward compatibility. So when we write a code, we need a tool to convert this as a backward compatible. So here is the latest version. And this is the one which is not supported in the older versions. One is like default argument values and another is let. So this is how they get converted. And this process is called transpiling. And so end of the day, we are in an era where we have a build tool which needs to transpile to a common version which across all the browser. And we need modularity to avoid the global scope issue. And then we need to be minified. So this is what build tool does and how. So in order to achieve that, we need to communicate between multiple files. I mean, the sharing the scope between the multiple files. So the same model pattern, these builders, bundlers started creating these two objects called exports and require. or we can call it as import also. So export is basically object and require is basically another function. So what exactly does? So this is the function you wrote, get date, and then you're telling that this get date can be consumed in another file by attaching to the exports object. And then using the required function, you can consume the same thing in another one. So that's what's like import and export logic. And how it is does. So this is a set of files you wrote in your code, and those files has been wrapped in the function expression, as I pointed out before. So this is how it does first. It creates a dictionary of all the function expressions and then convert into a dictionary of all the export objects. So how this bundler does it? That's the next thing. That's how yeah, that's what I'm going to show next. So this is a small uh, code snippet of how bundler works. So here is a small function called require. So this is the require is the one which is going to recursively run and bootstrap across all the file and going to create a dictionary of all the model exports. So it needs two input. One input is like the entire set of files, and the next second input is like the entry file. So in our case, the entry file will be index. So this is the one. So I just given the pointer like how JavaScript runs here. So empty object is created, and then it calls the first file, which is index.js, and creates an empty object for it. And then it started doing recursively, and every file first line will be executed. And in your case, in our case, it's the import statement. Here I'm just using a require now, and it keep going through every file and start building those objects because every file has a first file as a require. And moment it reaches a file that there is no require statement, it reaches the export statement next because this function is not executed immediately because it's just a definition, and then start filling those exports object. And that's how it creates this one. Now it reaches the first file, which is the entry file. And here we have a create button function. And now if you look at it, now the JavaScript closure chain comes into picture. So if you look at this function which says create button is pointed to something called CB in the file 3. So it went and accessed that, get the reference of that particular function. And there it has a reference outside its scope, which is B. So it checks in closure chain, in this case, the previous function, which is the body, and executes it. And then same thing it does for creating the paragraph. And then same thing it executes to add the listener function to it. And then display something on the screen. So now we are living in an era where JavaScript is being used to create the entire DOM element and also add the event listener to it. Now let me show how the interaction with the event listener happens now. So here's a user interacting with that button. And when user clicks it, it goes to this particular function. And then that function scope is in file 1. It gets to that from this reference. And then checks P. P is a G, and G is from file 1, which is get date function. So gets into that and gets the value and returns it and finally displays it. To show small demo, I have the code snippet here. Um, yeah, this is an empty page, nothing here. And here is the one which I just showed here. A small code snippet of how Webpack bundler works. I call it as a model manager. And this is a list of files I have here. And this is the entry point. And here it's got created. And to show the scope level here, let's say I'm checking the scope of the CP. I won't be able to see CP here. This is what nowadays the bundler does. And so what we have right now is like so whenever so this is what Webpack config exactly does indirect. So what I did is a minified version of Webpack config. So all it needs, it's like say a very minimalistic of entry point. That's what you give in a Webpack config. What is the entry point? From that, start bootstrapping and get entire graph tree. And then what kind of output you want? What's the name of the output you want? And that's what it is. So when I say production ready now, it's no more combined files.